The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is David Icke, the English writer and public speaker known since the 1990s as a professional conspiracy researcher, calling yourself a full-time investigator into who and what is really controlling the world. You are the author of 21 books and 10 DVDs and have lectured in over 25 countries, speaking live for up to 10 hours to huge audiences, filling stadiums like Wembley Arena. You are here for the second occasion today to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic and global lockdown, the looming economic recession, the impact of 5G technology, and the violations of our rights and freedoms of speech. David, welcome back to London Real.
Thank you, Brian.
It's been 19 days since you last came on the show. Since then, we are told that millions of people have been infected worldwide with this disease, with deaths now approaching 100,000. Nearly 3 billion people are locked down in their homes. Markets are off 30%, and a global recession is pending. Our last conversation went, quite frankly, viral, David. Over 7 million views that I can count, the most comments of any episode in London Real history, which tells me one thing, that people want to hear your opinion and people want to hear the truth. David, as you know, I don't agree with everything you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And at a time in this country when the regulator Ofcom is banning media outlets from talking about the quote-unquote 5G coronavirus conspiracy theories, I get very concerned. A lot of people told me not to do this interview today again, but in America, where I'm from, the First Amendment of the Constitution is the right to free speech and freedom of the press. And that right is being violated right now as we speak. George Orwell, in his famous book, 1984, said, "In times of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act." And David, that's what we're going to do today. Honestly, I didn't even know if we'd make it to this moment. I thought we might be shut down today. Where do we start? Is there a virus?
Since we last spoke, Brian, I've spent every waking moment, which has been most of every 24 hours, devouring information from virologists, specialists, doctors all around the world, in America, in Germany, in Austria, Italy, who would never be allowed to get near the BBC or CNN because they are demolishing the official story of this hoax. And if people go to davidicke.com when this interview is over, I put a special posting of a series of videos. It says for viewers to London Real. A series of videos by these doctors and others who in their various ways support all the elements of what I'm going to say today. So this is not me pulling it out the ether. There's no point in that. What's the point? You either deal with facts and what people who should know say, or you don't. So this is the headline to start with, which will shock a lot of people, I'm sure. There is no COVID-19. It doesn't exist. And I'm going to explain today why that is and how, therefore, a pandemic perception could be pulled off. Now, one of the doctors that I've been looking at is called Andrew Kaufman. He is a medical doctor in America. He works in psychiatry now. And he, like a lot of these doctors you'll never see on the BBC, started looking at the sequence of events that's led us to where we are now. And this is how it went. People started getting ill, for whatever reason, in China. And the Chinese authorities took genetic material from the fluid in the lungs of people who got ill. Only a few, a very small number. And they found what we would call genetic material. It wasn't an isolated virus. It was genetic material which can be there from a long list of causes, including lung cancer, by the way. And they decided that what was causing the illness was a virus, which has got the name COVID-19. But at no time did they isolate that so-called virus from the rest of the genetic material, much of which will be found in the bodies of most people. So they start out, before they started testing, diagnosing people in China from symptoms. And you will have heard this constantly recurring theme about coronavirus or COVID-19, because there's lots of coronaviruses, COVID-19 symptoms. And you'll hear this recurring line, flu-like symptoms. Now, these flu-like symptoms can be caused by a great range of different causes. But they decided on symptoms, which could come from many different causes, that those symptoms were now COVID-19. So you had flu-like symptoms, COVID-19. COVID-19. And so the numbers got bigger and bigger. And when we get to 5G, there is another element to this, which I also want to talk about in relation to China and in relation to the West as well. But they then develop this test, or start using this test, to test for COVID-19. And it's called an RT-PCR test. And, wait for it, it doesn't test for COVID-19. It tests for the genetic material, which has loads of different content, caused by many, many, many different possible causes. And if you test positive for the genetic material, not COVID-19, you are diagnosed to have COVID-19, and if you die, to have died from it. Now let's look at this RT-PCR test. It was developed, invented by a guy called Kary Mullis, a biochemist in America, in 1984. And it's used to try to diagnose many things. The same test has been used to try to diagnose lung cancer. The same test of genetic material that they are saying, you test positive, you've got COVID-19. Now, what did this Kary Mullis say, the inventor of the test? Oh, must get more people tested for COVID-19. The inventor of the test, what did he say? This test should not be used to diagnose infectious disease. The inventor of it said that. What are they doing to tell us who has and has not got this so-called COVID-19? The test that he says shouldn't be used for that very thing. So you test for this genetic material and you've got COVID-19. But there's another part of this. What this test does is it amplifies the material. In other words, it makes it larger, keep it simple. And as it gets larger in the cycles of amplification, what you say is causing the disease gets bigger and you can see it more, or say you can. I'm going to come to that in a second. But all the other content of the genetic material also gets amplified. And loads of this genetic material is already in the body of virtually everybody. And this is how the test works. You can fix the figures so easy like this. You do, say, 30, 35 cycles of amplification. You're going to bring into the test positive a series of things within that genetic material that become there to be seen at that level. So you're going to get some positives, which you're going to call COVID-19, but you're going to get some negatives because you haven't brought all that material into the testing process. But you amplify the genetic material, say, I don't know, 60 times. You have brought so much of the content of the genetic material to be entering the test process that at that level of amplification, virtually everybody will test positive, because all the genetic material that's in most people's body will now be testing positive in the test through this greater amplification. This means that the number of cycles of amplification you use, say in different countries, dictates how many positive tests you get. And therefore, all you've got to do is increase the amplification. You're going to get more and more positives, and you're going to call them COVID-19.
And amplification is how sensitive that test is.
Imagine you've got something the size of a pin, symbolically, pinhead. You can't really understand it because it's so small. You amplify it, and it becomes much greater, and you can now start looking at different elements of it.
And that's what the test does. It amplifies that.
It amplifies amplification. And another thing is that in 1890, a guy called Robert Koch, who was a bacteriologist and a physician, he developed something called the Koch postulates. And these were 4 criteria for proving that an agent, a so-called infectious agent, is the cause of what you say it is. This includes everyone who is subject to this agent has the same symptoms. 2, that you have isolated this agent, call it a virus, bacteria, whatever. You've isolated it, so there's no other material, only that. So there's no contamination, there's no false positives in the way I've described. You are only isolating that. But when you take that and you, say, inject it into a living host, that host will get what you say that is causing. And when you've got that host, you are able, number 4, to take that material you say is causing the illness, the infectious illness, out of the person, and again inject it into someone else, and they will get it. In terms of COVID-19, not one single one of those 4 Koch postulates, which have been used since 1890 by mainstream medicine the world over to prove that this is infecting and causing that, not one of them have been used and fulfilled. None of them. So then we come to something else that Andrew Kaufman identified, which was a tremendous piece of observation and research. You can see it in his video on davidicke.com when this is over. What happens when a cell gets poisoned is it secretes something called exosomes. This is part of the natural, everyday immune system response to poison cells. And these exosomes, as they are released, and they're only released when the cell is poisoned, and it can be poisoned through many, many reasons. It can be toxicity. Wait for this one. It can be poison through stress and fear. You imagine the stress and fear that's going on in the world now during this lockdown. It can be caused by disease, infection, and it can be caused by electromagnetic fields, which will become very relevant when we get into 5G. So these exosomes are released, and one of the roles of exosomes is poison cells warning other cells as they travel around, there's a problem. Get ready, look, there's a problem here. So all you have to do to get exosomes released is to have poison cells by these various reasons. What Kaufman started looking at was under the microscope pictures of exosomes, what they look like. And then he looked at an under the microscope picture of what is claimed to be COVID-19. These two were exactly the same. He then starts looking at the genetic makeup of the exosomes, which you will find in the lung fluid of people who have problems with the lungs, because the problems are generating the release of exosomes. And he looked at the genetic makeup claimed for COVID-19. They are exactly the same in every relevant way. An exosome and so-called COVID-19 even lock into the same cell receptors as each other. They are, as Kaufman has clearly shown, the same thing. So what's gone on here is they've taken a natural response mechanism of the body, immune system, to poisonous cells, and they've renamed it COVID-19. Now, this genetic material they've taken from the lungs of people, and what is the basis of this test, will contain, by its very nature, these exosomes. So they're finding a natural human immune system response mechanism, this secretion from poison cells, and they're calling it COVID-19. And because anyone who has any level of cellular toxicity is going to produce these exosomes, then the potential for positive tests, yes, COVID-19 is a pandemic, is endless. So what has happened is it was decided in China, and by the way, if you get deeper into this, and I hope we will later, about why this is being done, this global cult that I have been exposing for 30 years, that is pushing the world towards this global fascist Orwellian state, which I've been saying was coming for 30 years, hello, we're here, has no borders. It operates in every country in the shadows. Politicians are just here today, gone tomorrow. That's always there. China is one of its biggest centers, along with America, Israel, Britain, Germany, Italy. And so just follow this sequence through. They decide in China early on, and there's a 5G element to this, which I'll get into later, that it's a virus. They don't isolate the virus. They test it, or they diagnose it, first of all, only on symptoms. And then they start testing, and they use this test, which is testing for genetic material, not COVID-19. And then it starts moving out into the West. And Western doctors, nurses, medical professionals, etc., are told this COVID-19 is moving out. World Health Organization, it's a pandemic. And we'll get into who owns the World Health Organization later. And these are the symptoms. So what do they start doing? Anyone with flu-like symptoms now gets diagnosed COVID-19 purely on frickin' symptoms. And so the numbers start to go up. The problem is that this is supposed to be a deadly virus, but there's not enough people dying to justify that description. So this is what they start doing. Anyone who gets ill for any reason whatsoever, by the way, even falling down the frickin' stairs, and goes to hospital, they now get tested for COVID-19. Now, because they're testing for genetic material, which is in lots of people's bodies, they get lots of positives. And although they're in hospital for late-stage cancer, for heart disease and heart failure, and for other caused flu-like symptoms, if they've tested positive for COVID-19, when they die, they are diagnosed as having died, officially, from COVID-19. This is why you are having more and more people, families, loved ones, saying, my family member, whatever, has been diagnosed as having died from COVID-19, and they didn't. They died from this, they died from that. They've had it for ages. Great example. For people around the world watching this, there was one time a famous comedian called Eddie Large in a comedy duo called Little and Large. And Eddie Large has had a heart problem for a while, it seems. And he goes into hospital with heart failure. While he's in hospital, he gets diagnosed with COVID-19, of course, tested him. And when he died, the wording in the papers, in the media, was that Eddie Large died in hospital after testing positive for COVID-19. He died of a failing heart, but COVID-19 will be the diagnosis, and the numbers keep going up.
And you're saying the total numbers of deaths in the world has not changed anomalously, but we've reclassified them as COVID-19 because they tested positive. And you said the language is interesting because they don't say they died from COVID-19, they died from after testing positive to COVID-19.
This is interesting. I've been making this point now for some many days. Watch the media language as they used with Eddie Large. Overwhelmingly, they're not saying that this person or this number have died from COVID-19. Very difficult to die from something you can't even prove exists. They say, this is the wording, and you see it repeated all the time, this person or this number died after testing positive for COVID-19. Not that they died from it, but look at the implication. Oh, Eddie Large, he died from COVID-19. Oh, everyone's getting it. And so you have control of the figures by the way you transfer symptoms from other causes to you've got COVID-19. You control the figures by the way you test, not for COVID-19, but for a genetic material. And you control the death figures by who you designate as died from COVID-19 when they've died from other things. You know, people are being designated to have died from COVID-19 who have late stage cancer. And here's a figure for you, Brian. This is official figures from the Italian medical establishment, what we would call in Britain the National Health Service. 99% of people who have died from COVID-19 in Italy, 99% have had 1, 2, 3 or more other health problems for which they were in hospital or for which they were suffering. And so it's so easy to take people dying of other things and to then designate them COVID-19. This is not to say all the nurses and all the doctors are in on it. You only need a hierarchy to say this is what you have to do, and they do it. This is how it works. And you mentioned something very important. The last time I looked, the death figures from all causes in Europe overall and in the United Kingdom had not risen compared with last year, etc., to the extent that even begins to encompass all the people we are told are dying from COVID-19. And the reason that is, but that could change for reasons I'll come to when we get to 5G, the reason that is vastly more people are not dying. They're being redesignated to have died from COVID-19 when they've died from other things. Now, let's look at Lombardy, which is the center of the Italian outbreak, which has been such a focus of attention, and the rest of Europe and the Western world has been frightened to death. Oh, we could be Italy next. Lombardy, which includes Milan, is notorious globally for its toxic, polluted air, just as Wuhan is and China is. And therefore, vastly more people die every year in Lombardy, not least from lung problems, than do in the rest of Italy. The last figures I saw, just a small few hundred, under 100,000 people died in a year in Lombardy. The next second place Italian region, Lazio, was 57,000. So you have an area of Italy where loads of people die, not least from lung disease, and you have tremendous potential, therefore, to make this diagnostic leap, which takes people dying of other things and makes it seem as if they've died from COVID-19. And therefore, you control the figures. And what you can do, you can test in a certain way, and you can diagnose in a certain way, and the figures go up. And then when you diagnose and test in a different way, maybe you reduce the number of cycles of amplification of this genetic material that you're using in the test, the figures go down. Have you noticed something, mate? We had in China this extraordinary reaction, the lockdown. They were building new hospitals in a week to 10 days to meet the absolute devastating crisis of this virus, right? In next to no time, by comparison with where they were, those hospitals are closed. The numbers have plummeted, they say. They're now starting flights. The economy is reopening. People are going back out on the streets. What? What happened suddenly to change all that? Because it was suddenly. But if you are testing people in a certain way and you're diagnosing people in a certain way, and we're going to bring 5G into this later on as well, then you change the diagnosis and you change the way you're testing. And what happens to the numbers? They frickin' plummet. Now, another aspect of this, Brian, which is sickening beyond belief, but I've seen enough evidence to see that it's true from people that have contacted me, and people have even said things on social media about, you know, what's happened to their loved ones. They want, and when I say they, I mean this cult, which controls the pyramid of reaction. They obviously want as many dead people as possible that can be designated COVID-19, because that adds to this whole pandemic.
And we're going to talk about why later.
We are going to talk about why, because it's a very, very big and simple reason why, and it relates to why there's a lockdown at all. But what's clearly happening is that old people in hospital, for anything, first of all, they're being tested for COVID-19, this genetic material. And for reasons I've explained, they're going to, a lot of them are going to test positive. Not for the virus, for the genetic material. They're going to them, and according to loved ones and families, the people on the ward, etc., have said to them it's government policy. And they're trying to get these old people. You know the old people that the lockdown was to protect? Yeah, right. They're trying to get them to sign do not resuscitate forms, which means they can be allowed to die and not resuscitated. And when they die without resuscitation, they will be called COVID-19. Have you noticed how this is now starting to seep out? Oh, we may have to make choices about
the triage,
about who we treat, you know, and the older people. Well, you know, we're going to have to make some hard choices. Old people that you're telling not to resuscitate, to sign non-resuscitation forms, right? So they are despicably abusing the very old people that they say this lockdown is to protect. One of the family members that contacted me talked about her 83-year-old mother who was in hospital for an orthopedic reason. Not some bloody virus. And the doctors came along to her and tried to get her to sign a do not resuscitate form, for she's got an orthopedic problem. And, you know, she had her faculties about her and she refused, but a lot of people won't, because a lot of old people won't, they won't know what's going on.
And they're trying to get them to sign it so they can save the other people.
That's what they say.
That's what they say.
But what, I mean, Orwellian language, Brian, you have to invert everything. They're getting them to sign it so that they can let them die. And everyone who dies is a COVID-19 because they've tested. This is the scam that's going on. And what it means is that they control the figures by the way that they test, by the way they diagnose, and the way they count them. And thus, the figures can be allowed to go up and up and up to justify further lockdown. And then when they think, as I said towards the end of our last interview a couple of weeks ago, when will it be over? It will be over, actually temporarily, we can come to that later, when they think they have reached the point where everything they want from this, which is a completely destroyed global economy, it is vast numbers of people who've lost their independent livelihood and income and thus become dependent on the state, and you do what the state says if you want your pittance every month. They will bring an end to this and bring the numbers down. Oh, we're past the curve. When they think it's gone far enough for them to have got everything they wanted from it. Look at China. Look at China. They did exactly the same. Oh, it's terrible, terrible. Oh, gone.
How can it be gone in China?
How can it be gone?
Doesn't make any sense.
No sense.
Billion plus people.
No sense.
This is infectious in urban environments. They have them everywhere. Now,
No
people
sense.
say they're lying about those numbers. I had a doctor on this, as the CIA has seen these funeral urns being bought, and those are going through the roof.
Well, all you can say is that they're opening up China, they're opening up industry, people are going out on the street, and they're opening up air travel again. The whole point is, however, that the authorities control the figures, so they control, and there's another way that they can control the figures when we get into 5G, and thus they can decide when this thing comes down anytime they want, just by changing the way that they count and changing the way that
they test.
They test. Now, look at this sequence. They were not getting enough dead people from this virus to justify the fact that it was lethal. The vast, overwhelming majority of people have no symptoms or mild symptoms. Now, just before I go to this point, something else I should add. This RT-PCR test cannot and does not test for how much of a, quote, virus you have. And I will be sitting here now, you'll be sitting there now, everyone watching this program will be sitting there, and they have all these different, what people call viruses, actually part of the natural immune system, but they will have that in their bodies. And it will be at a level, loads of it, and it will be at a level that will never trouble them. That's why you can test positive for something and have no symptoms, because it's at such a low level, it's going to trouble you. The immune system will sort that out, keeps it all under control. So what you can't do with this test is test for how much of a, quote, virus you actually have. And in the words of one doctor scientist that I've quoted in recent times, you need massive amounts of it for you to be sick. So they can't even begin to tell you if your sickness is from some virus or other unless they can test how much of it you have. And this test doesn't do that. So you don't have enough dead people to justify the fact that this is lethal. But you want a lockdown. You want this lockdown for much greater reasons, which we'll come to. So what you do is you say, oh yeah, well, not that many people have died so far, but what's coming, have you noticed all around the world, that's what you're getting? Oh, wait for the surge. Well, the surge can come anytime they want to increase the way that they test and increase the way that they count the numbers. So they can create a surge, that's not a problem, or the illusion of one, but it's in the future. So along comes, in this country, and they also advised America too, and other countries in the same way, along comes, while Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister is saying, oh, there's no need for this, there's no need to shut the football down, no, and there's no need to close the schools. You remember that? Along comes Imperial College. And Imperial College specialise in absolutely shite computer modelling. They have a terrible history for it over the years. The computer models that say the ice cap should have gone by now, right? Because we're all dying from global warming. How do you know? Because my computer model says so, right? So they computer modelled COVID-19. Particularly a guy called Professor Neil Ferguson, who should never, ever, in the entirety of his life, ever advise any government ever again. And he says, Mr. Johnson, 250,000 to 500,000 people could die in Britain of this virus. So now, Johnson shuts himself. Because he's having people saying to him, Boris, this is what could happen, mate, if you don't lock it down, if you don't have social distancing and all that stuff. And you know something, mate, you're going to be blamed for it. Oh, massive change attack. And from, look, we're not going to close the schools. We don't need to close the football, because the football wasn't shut down by Johnson. It was shut down by the football authorities. Suddenly, lockdown. And what they're doing all around the world, they're doing it in increments. Oh, a little bit, and they get people used to that. And then, fiercer. And they're doing it in increments. And they planned, if we allow it, let's get into that later as well, they planned to push this on into more extremes. And so when the lockdown happens, and everyone's basically under frickin' house arrest, he said, Ferguson, that 1 million, 2 million, whatever it was, Americans were going to die from this.
2.1 million.
Yeah, right.
500,000 in the UK.
Yeah, exactly. When the lockdown happens, he suddenly rolls back, right? Oh no, it's less than 20,000. Someone else from Imperial College, which is very closely connected to Freemasons, by the way, and Freemasonry. And by the way, the part of the college where Ferguson works takes funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which we are going to get in seriously to later on. Because Gates is absolutely, as a gopher, but a rich one of this cult, he is right involved in this in ways that we'll come to. So now he's rolling it back, and someone else from Imperial College suddenly says, oh no, it could be 7,500 who'll die.
Yeah, or even less. I heard like 5,700 or
yeah.
something.
But the lockdowns happened. And the lockdown happened on it's going to be 250,000, right? You imagine, Brian, another computer modeler came along, government advisor. Well, my model says that ain't going to happen. No. We don't have to shut anything down. It's not going to happen. How long would he be a government advisor? Yeah, 30 seconds. They get what they want to do what they want. And so we are now in this lockdown, and in a matter of days, weeks at most, we have gone from what people perceived as a free world to global fascism, global tyranny, in which a tiny, tiny few people have got billions, half the world's population, under house arrest. And it's been done by scamming this whole COVID-19 thing, which brings me, mate, to 5G.
Before we go to 5G, question for you.
Go on.
I've been watching Trump's live conferences every night, and he has Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx that come up. Are they aware that this test might not be accurate? Are they part of this, or are they just following the numbers? Oh, you tested? Okay. Oh, you tested? Then that's a death. Are they part of this, or are they just reacting as medical professionals and scientists?
You'd have to do serious research into both of them to answer that question. But this is how it works. You've got a pyramid. This is how this cult works. You've got a pyramid, and at the top are the inner circle of the cult that are driving this globally. As you come down from the pyramid peak, you're meeting more and more and more people, but each step down know less and less and less of what they know. Because the only way that a few can manipulate the world as they do is by fierce compartmentalization, where people only know what they need to know to make their contribution without knowing how their contribution connects with their contribution and theirs and theirs and theirs to create a very different picture to what they think they're actually part of. So as you come down, at the top of the pyramid, they absolutely know they're manipulating, they know it's a scam, but you're in the medical profession and you are told these are the symptoms. When you see these symptoms, you diagnose COVID-19. When anyone comes into hospital, you test for COVID-19. If they die of whatever, you put COVID-19 on the death certificate. So what's this great line? In and after every tyranny, I was only following orders. This is how it works. But some nurses and some medical professionals, professionals, one I'm going to come to in a second with 5G, have broken ranks and said this is crap. A, we're diagnosing COVID-19 for people deaths that have not died from it and so on. And also, we're being asked to get old people to sign do not resuscitate forms. So some of them are breaking ranks, but most of them won't. They just carry on and just, they might complain and moan under their breath, but they do it. This is how it works. So you have this World Health Organization. Who's the second biggest funder of the World Health Organization, second only to the United States government? Bill Gates. He owns it. And so this Tedros, this guy from Ethiopia, from the Marxist human rights destroying government of Ethiopia, who was the health minister of Ethiopia and was caught out 3 times for covering up cholera epidemics, he's head of the World Health Organization for no other reason than he'll do what he's told. So the World Health Organization is driving this policy, a World Health Organization created by the Rockefellers, by the way.
That is constantly making the wrong calls these last few months.
The right call for the cult, the wrong call for humanity. And so from this World Health Organization, you're having this policy and this way of doing things coming down. You therefore just follow it. You follow the protocol. And I'll give you a great example of that in a second when we get to 5G. So, because China imposed that vicious draconian lockdown, and then the numbers started falling, what did that do? It set the precedent in countries that followed. The way to deal with this, like China has, is to have a lockdown and keep people away from each other. It's a scam, and this cult is orchestrating it. While I put a meme on the internet in the last fortnight, and it's a picture of the Earth, and it says ruled by psychopaths, run by idiots. And that dynamic is how it works. You've got the psychopaths in the background who are orchestrating it, and then you've got the clueless, who am I, where am I, what's going on, people in politics, etc., who are responding to that policy like, oh, everyone's going to die, oh, we better lock down then, who are clueless about what's actually going on.
I don't feel like Trump and Boris are part of this grand scheme. They look like they're reacting to a situation and trying to save themselves politically, and maybe trying to save people based on those constraints or those beliefs.
You look at Boris Johnson, who's, as we speak, he's in hospital. They've got him out of the way, really. And isn't it amazing, all those people at the press conference every day, COVID-19, COVID-19 lockdown, all got COVID-19 at the same time. I thought it was very strange. Anyway, you look at Boris Johnson's face. He looks a bewildered, lost man. Because he ain't calling the shots. He'll get the blame for it, but he ain't calling the shots. His advisors are calling the shots. That's what's driving it. The shadows are driving the policy. This is why the same policy is happening in every country, because it's essentially globally dictated. And Trump has tried to, I have great problems with Trump, but Trump has tried, at least publicly, to push back against this, because they know their own political careers as prime minister and president are going to be absolutely destroyed by this economic Armageddon that these lockdowns have created, based on what? Frickin' computer models and a bloody virus that doesn't exist and never has been shown to be. So they've been pushing back, but look at the pressure. Mr. Trump, 2 million Americans are going to die if you don't lock the country down, right? So if we come to 5G, it's funny because the first time I sat here and we chatted, what was it? Was it 2018?
Yeah, over 2 years ago.
2018.
2 years ago.
Part of that chat was about my opinion of 5G. And some people have started putting those clips out on the internet. Because I pointed out that 5G was a tremendously greater power of electromagnetic energy than we'd ever seen before. It's not just a little touch on from 4G. 4G is bad enough, 3G is bad enough. It's not just a touch on from 4G. It's a whole new part of the electromagnetic spectrum, millimeter waves, and immensely more powerful than everything we've seen before. Now, the human body is an electromagnetic field. The brain communicates with the rest of the body and the cells electrically. It processes thought information electrically. We are on one level electromagnetic organisms, entities. When that electromagnetic field is in balance, we are healthy. When it is in imbalance or disharmony, we get dis-ease, disease, disharmony, which manifests as what we call physical disease and psychological disease through the way the processing of information by the brain is affected. We are now being bombarded 24/7 by electromagnetic, technologically generated electromagnetic fields and Wi-Fi. And in this period of running up to this virus, we've had the introduction in more and more places of 5G. Now, there's a book called The Invisible Rainbow by a man called Arthur Furstenberg. And he has been researching the impact on health of electromagnetic fields, technologically generated, for a long time. And in this book, he documents that every time we have had a major, quote, epidemic, global epidemic, going back to Spanish flu in 1918, which had nothing to do with Spain, it came out of military bases. That every time we've had this pandemic situation, so often with flu-like symptoms, it has preceded the introduction of another level of power of technologically generated radiation. And Furstenberg said in 2018 before 5G and before COVID-19 that every single massive increase in technologically generated radiation impacting on the Earth's magnetic field, which we're interacting with all the time, has produced massive problems in terms of health for the human population. He said that in 2018. In 2019, they introduced 5G, which some of us and loads of doctors and scientists who call for it to be stopped because it hadn't been tested, they admit that, for its impact on psychology and human health.
Has it had any independent tests?
None. The only independent testing it's had, which has been by truly independent people outside of the telecommunications industry, you've seen people say this could be disastrous for human health, and they've called for it to be stopped. Doctors, scientists from 41 countries have signed letters saying this has got to be stopped. Of course it wasn't stopped. And the reason that it's been rolled out without testing, which they've admitted on Capitol Hill, a senator asked the members of the telecommunications industry, this was last year, how much testing have you done? How much money have you spent on testing the effect of 5G on human health? And they said 0. Reason that is because if they had, and that had been publicly published, 5G would never have been allowed. So,
but the telecom companies don't want to hurt us with the 5G, not them particularly.
We come back to the pyramid. The telecommunications industry is owned by this cult ultimately, because what the telecommunications industry is doing with all this smart technology and satellites, which I'll get to in a second, beaming 5G at every inch of the earth, is absolutely crucial to total human control via artificial intelligence. So in the pyramid of the telecommunications industry, there will be lots of people here who are clueless about the impact and really wouldn't really want to look at it because look at all the dollars available. But when you get to that level of the telecommunications industry, the focal point of control, they absolutely know what it's going to do. And why? Because they want that done, because they want that effect on humanity. They have the ability to manipulate people psychologically and just basically, they could do a mass cull with 5G. So, what does 5G do? What does 4G do, but 5G even more? It poisons the cells, which get poisoned by technological electromagnetic fields. The cells get poisoned. They release exosomes as an immune response, and they test for COVID-19. So, where was the first Chinese city to introduce 5G just before the virus broke out? Wuhan. So here's another scenario that people might just take on board and think about. And by the way, before I say that, while this lockdown has been going on, I know from communications to me and Gaz and Jamie at davidicke.com, I know from all the postings on the internet, not just in Britain, but around the world in America, that while this lockdown has been going on, 5G masts are being rolled out at a very rapid rate. In the same period of this lockdown, something like another 21 towns and cities have been opened in Britain to 5G. 5G is being rolled out all over the world at a very great rate of knots.
This is a time where everything is supposed to be stopped.
Yeah.
And they're still building towers overnight.
Yes. because that's considered essential work. And to the cult, it is essential because they want 5G everywhere. At the same time that this is happening in terms of towers all over the world being rolled out, and of course people are not able to protest because they are isolated from each other and under house arrest. That's why they're doing it. Elon Musk, who is, I wouldn't call him a psychopath because that's not enough. This man is a super psychopath. Reason, he knows what this impact is going to be. He is putting, week by week, more and more satellites at low altitudes, beaming 5G at the Earth. And he has permission for like tens of thousands already, and he's just getting towards that goal. What he wants is 42,000. Already, with just the ones he's got up there now, the astronomy community, he's been complaining around the world, they can't see the frickin' night sky anymore because of these satellites which are beaming 5G at the Earth. And while this lockdown has been on, he has been given permission by the Federal Communications Commission, which allowed the rollout of 5G without testing because it's owned by the cult. He's been given permission for 1 million ground antenna in America, which will, through electromagnetic fields, connect with the satellites. Because what they're creating, I've been writing this for decades, they are creating a technological sub-reality of 5G, what they call the smart grid, surrounding the world with satellites and pouring this stuff in, because they're creating a sub-reality to which the human mind will be connected to via AI, and they're even giving you a time when this should start to happen in a serious way, 2030, a year that keeps coming up for everything. So that's what is going on.
And he got this permission during the lockdown.
Yes, during the lockdown. Now, let's just look at this. Let's take a Chinese scenario. But I've got to say this first. 5G is a range of frequencies. It's not one frequency. Now, they're starting here, but they want to go there. And they can already go there, and going there has great implications in the ways that I'm going to describe. If people go to that package for London Real viewers on my website, they'll see in the line of videos a New York doctor. This is a New York doctor who's so exasperated he made a video. He just kind of really stepped out of the line, out of the box. And he's been working at a emergency intensive care unit at a hospital in New York. And what he says on this video is, look, this is not COVID-19. It's not what we're told it is. He says, we were told, look at the pyramid, right? And everyone does as they're told. He said, we were told to treat people with lung problems that come to us as people who have an infectious disease called COVID-19. He said, that is not what we are seeing. After the interview, go and see him talk on the video. This is not what we're seeing, he said. He said, I've never seen anything like this in terms of what I'm seeing in the lungs of these people and what these people are suffering and dying from. This is what he said. Their lungs look like someone who's flying at 30,000 feet and there's cabin pressure disappears, the oxygen disappears, and they slowly die of lack of oxygen. He said another analogy, it's like their lungs look like something I would expect if you took someone and you put them on the top of Everest with no acclimatization and obviously no breathing apparatus, you would expect their lungs to do that. He said, I don't know what's going on, but it's not COVID-19, it's not an infectious disease, and I've never seen anything like it. Now, and this is admitted by the telecommunications industry. 5G at 60 gigahertz, which is where they want to take it, and I say already bloody have on the quiet, stops the human body and blood absorbing oxygen. If someone is hit by 60 gigahertz frequencies of 5G, they will not be able to absorb enough oxygen. They would just collapse in the street. And those symptoms, that outcome, is so exactly what this doctor in New York is describing he is seeing, but says, I don't know what's going on, never seen anything like it. And you know, let me just bring this around. They have not had enough dead people, despite fixing the figures and getting as many people to die of COVID-19 as possible, to justify the fact that it's this vastly deadly virus. But at the same time, the death figures are basically not going up of all causes. They're building morgues. They're turning football pitches into morgues. They're doing it in many, many countries. They're having preparations for lots and lots of dead people. They don't fit, except just fixing the figures wouldn't justify filling those, because they'd never do it. And if they're building all these massive mortuaries, etc., and the figures start to go down, as they have in China, oh, we're through it, they're going to look total prats. So why are they doing it? Well, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I'm saying this is something that we should watch for. The more, this is why they're doing it now, rolling out all these 5G towers, etc., everywhere, these satellites, the more that they expand 5G, the more 5G is going to impact upon the population's health. And the more it impacts upon the population's health, the more they can say it's caused by COVID-19. And if they start firing out 5G at 60 gigahertz, they're going to have a lot of people who are going to keel over because they can't absorb oxygen. Now, if they did that, they could start filling mortuaries, and they could say, look, this is the virus, what it's doing, we must have even more lockdown, and it must go on and on and on and on. So we need to watch for that. Given the figures and the numbers we've had so far, if people start going down in large numbers, in anywhere in the world where there's 5G, and end up in these mortuaries, we should start to question big time and put two and two together. Because that happening on the trajectory of figures so far would be unexplainable, but not if they're taking oxygen out of the atmosphere. And it can be done in a very small area. You can target an old people's home, and you can take the oxygen out with 5G, and people will die. And you'll say COVID-19. And you know what's happening? And there's been, you know, what are now called citizen journalists, people who go out with their cameras and their phone cameras to film this stuff. What they're doing while the schools are closed, what they're doing while people are locked away is they're putting 5G into schools. You know where else they're putting 5G? Into frickin' hospitals. They're putting 5G everywhere. And so once this is set up, they have the ability to manipulate people psychologically and physically. And where this is all leading, well, part of where it's all leading, is to the vaccine.
Now, before we get to the vaccine, there's hospitals that we've seen that are vacant.
Yeah.
There are these emergency things that are vacant. And some of these curves we're told are flattening, which means, like you said, they're not going to be used.
No.
Which is going to make this all look like a big overreaction, which is going to make all these lockdown powers be able to easily be reversed.
So exactly. So the question is, are they going to allow that to happen and just say, oh no, because this is the key. This is the scam. When these figures that this Imperial College and this Neil Ferguson prat claimed don't manifest, what are they going to say? The lockdown was the reason they didn't manifest. So basically they can't lose. But they locked down Italy on March the 9th, and the figures have just gone and up week after week after week after week. Whereas in China, they went down like that. Will they just let it go down and that's the end of it? Or are they building these massively overreacting morgues, etc., for a reason? Because you're absolutely right. We are told by the media, and by the media I don't mean journalists, by the way. They'll never be journalists. We're talking about war zone hospitals. Now, if they start using 60 gigahertz 5G to take out people absorbing oxygen, then there may well be war zone hospitals in that scenario. But as things are, they're not war zone hospitals. People have been going around all over the world, you're absolutely right what you say, to these war zone hospitals. They're frickin' empty. They're empty. One guy went round a hospital in Stoke Mandeville for 2 hours, filming everything. Bloody place was empty. What did they do? Well done, mate. Why is this hospital empty? It's supposed to be a war zone. They've jailed him for doing that. And you mentioned it earlier, this is a very important point. We have in this country a government department, a government censor, called Ofcom, Office of Communications, which is the regulator of British broadcasters. They have said, and it's run by a lady called Melanie Dawes. We need to note these names down, ladies and gentlemen. And when we're through this, at some level through it, these people have to be called to account. We have a situation where this lady and her organization, which is a government department, has told British broadcasters, and of course they've complied spinelessly as usual, that they will face serious sanctions if they allow any discussion on their television stations and radio stations about any connection between 5G and so-called COVID-19. The British government, through this other idiot, the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, people are sitting there all over their houses, 66 million people in this country, sitting in my house and doing as I'm told, because this guy who you wouldn't let run a Lego house, Hancock, he's saying that everyone must do that. I mean, what are we doing? Anyway, people like him are now saying to the giants of Silicon Valley, your Zuckerbergs at Facebook, your Brins and Pages at Google, and your Wachowskis at Google-owned YouTube, etc., that they should ban people who are making a connection between 5G and this COVID-19 crisis. So that tells you, one, they couldn't care less about freedom and the right to free debate. Thus, they have no right to be in government and no right to be running a broadcast regulator. But it tells you something else. Number two, it tells you there is a link between 5G and this health crisis, COVID-19 as they call it. There is a link. There's only one reason they don't want it discussed, because there is a link. And who's been promoting 5G and the rollout of 5G? Who runs the licenses for 5G? Ofcom, same woman. So, there is a link between 5G and this so-called COVID-19, the situation we're facing. That's why they want to shut it down. If you can't win a debate, and they can't win this one, then don't have it. That is the motto of every tyranny in known human history. And
And this is the only thing they're telling broadcasters not to talk about. They're not talking about, don't talk about the vaccines, don't talk about the this. It's this specific thing.
Yeah.
And they're going out there. If I was a radio station or television station right now, I'd probably be arrested. We would have been shut down today. But we're not, because we're not governed by them right now.
Right now. But I mean, they want the censorship to go on and on and on, because you see, when your conspiracy is control of perception, which means control of behavior, see, the control of perception, there is a virus and it's dangerous, has led to behavior of compliance with house arrest. If people realize there is no frickin' virus and it's a total scam, then their likelihood of acquiescing in that way is less, because their perception is different, so their behavior is different. So where does perception come from? It comes from information received. That's why they want to dominate control of information. And let's just ask this question. Say there's no connection whatsoever between 5G and this COVID-19 so-called pandemic. Say there's no connection. What harm is done by discussing whether there is on a broadcast station? None. So the reason they don't want it discussed is there is a frickin' link. And the fact that, the broadcasters are just, oh, yes, miss, sorry, miss, shows that they're next to bleeding useless. It's websites like mine, it's London Real and such organizations around the world where the real journalism goes on and the real information is made available to people. Because don't ask the mainstream to tell you. I mean, the BBC is not a news organization, it's a government department. What they call journalists are actually civil servants in truth. Call themselves journalists, they're not. You look at any situation and the BBC will toe the establishment line and promote nothing but that line and not allow questioning of it every time. BBC is long past the point where it is any use to anyone except the government. And so we come round to vaccines.
First of all, 5G towers in Belfast, Liverpool, Birmingham in the last week have been burned. And overnight, because people are responding. There's all of this stuff going on in the Facebook groups. What do you think of that? And I know towards the end of this, you're going to tell us about next steps for us, but what do you think about that action?
It's not for me to tell anyone what to do, because that's their right to choose. But you look at the situation, and if 5G continues and reaches where they want to take it, human life as we'd known it is over. I've been saying this for so long. Oh, you're mad. That David Icke's mad. Oh, yeah, okay. You're not laughing now, are you? So people have to make a decision. I am personally absolutely anti-violence against people. And I don't see violence against people taking us absolutely anywhere. It's just an, you know, if you use violence against people in the name of doing something you believe to be right, then you're just a mirror of what you are seeking to fight. You know, I have this phrase, what you fight, you become. What you hate, you become. But people will have to make their own decisions. All I will say and repeat again, if this 5G continues and this rollout continues, that's it, over. What people decide to do about that is up to them. But it's very clear that what's happened is people have been put under house arrest on this false premise. So there's no gathering, there's no ability to protest, and so they have free rein to rapidly deploy and expand 5G, while so many people have had their employment destroyed, have had their businesses destroyed because they are deemed by the government non-essential, whereas rapidly deploying 5G towers with all their destructive and psychological potential is deemed to be essential work. Now you put that little lot together and you can see that there is a massive conspiracy going on here to roll out 5G without protest. And that means it ain't good for humanity. And Elon Musk, who's this Silicon Valley celebrity, oh look, it's Elon Musk, is, like all of these people involved in this, a super psychopath. He should be in jail for the rest of his human life, and I hope they would put him in the same cell as Bill Gates, because they deserve each other. He is putting up more and more satellites, beaming this desperately destructive 5G at the Earth. Because you see, when you're building a technological sub-reality to which every human being is connected via AI connections to the brain, then you have to create a situation where there is a, if you like, Wi-Fi field in every inch of the planet. The only way you're going to do that is from space, every inch of the planet. And that's what they're doing. And Elon Musk knows that. And that's why he's a psychopath. Talking of which, we may turn to
vaccines.
Bill Gates.
And then I want to talk about the psychology of what all this is doing to us.
Exactly. So where this is leading is a vaccine. And in that vaccine will be lots of genetic material, stuff that will trigger poison in the cells, which will trigger exosomes, which will, the virus. But also in that vaccine will be nanotechnology microchips. I mentioned a few minutes ago that Elon Musk had got permission for 1 million ground antennae to interact with his satellites. These nano microchips, which are being put into us in many ways, but let's keep with the vaccines, are well beyond the ability of human sight to see. That's why they're nano. And they are known as smart dust, of course, smart on everything. They're known as nanobots, they're known as neurobots, lots of different names they give them. Smart dust will do. And the idea is to put them in the body, and they will act within humans like the ground antenna act with the satellites of Musk. They connect humans to this grid, this technological sub-reality, this AI-controlled sub-reality. So we basically become nothing more than computer terminals. That's the idea. And I'll tell you a quick story, which will lead me round to nano microchips in vaccines. In the late 1990s, I was asked to go and see a CIA scientist in California because he wanted to get out things that were going on, but he couldn't, and why he couldn't became very obvious. So I went to see him at his house. He's in Southern California, and his family's there, and his children are there, and they gave me some food, and we had a long chat that evening. And he wanted to tell me things that were happening because he couldn't. He said he joined the CIA, he was a scientist, because he thought he was serving his country. And he said when he got in, he realized that this conspiracy I've been exposing for 30 years was actually happening. That's why he contacted me. And he said, I'm not doing it. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not playing a part in that. And he walked out. He said, next thing he knew, he left home after he walked out. And he said, I got missing time. He said, I don't know what happened after that. The next thing I know after leaving home is I woke up on this medical type bench in this room. He was on his own. And he's lying there and he gets his faculties back and he realizes something stuck to his chest. So he opens his shirt, and he was opening his shirt and showing me as he was telling me this story. I seriously wasn't expecting it, I can tell you. And what happens, as he opened his shirt, on his chest was like a see-through plastic shampoo sachet. And inside was this orangey liquid, orangey golden type liquid. And he said, because I'd asked him the question before he did this, why do you do what you do? I knew what the answer was going to be, but I wanted him to tell me in his own words. Why do you still work for him then? He said, because of this. In the CIA, they call these patches. Someone's been patched. And what they did in that missing time is they manipulate their bodies. He said, there were at least 1,000 other scientists who were patched at the time. We're talking late 90s, about 97, something like that. And he said, I am coming around to microchips and vaccines. And he said, in that missing time, what they do is they manipulate your body to need the drug in the patch to survive. How they do it, I don't know, but they do it. And he said, this patch has to be replaced every 72 hours. And if you are not repatched, then you start to die a very unpleasant death. And he said, I called their bluff on one occasion to see if they were just scamming me, and they weren't messing. That's what happened. So if he doesn't do and use his expertise to support the CIA in this whole global cult scam and conspiracy, then he's not repatched. And he actually said to me, I'm holding back knowledge that I have that they want. And I'm letting them know I am, because I know from other people it's happened to, that once they think they've taken everything they can get from you, they just don't repatch you. Because then you can't go and tell anybody what the hell's been going on. So he took a lot of guts to talk to me. Anyway, this is what he also told me. Now remember, this is 1997-ish. No one's talking about nanotechnology, really. Later it was, now it's in everything, it's in food. But they weren't talking about it then in the, general arena. He said, what they're doing is they are injecting people with tiny microchips that you can't see in vaccination programs. He told me what these chips were for. And this is like late 90s. So these vaccines that are promoted by Bill Gates and funded by Bill Gates like no one else on earth, not least through an organization called Gavi. Bill Gates and Gavi want to vaccinate everyone. And they want something else. This Gavi organization of Bill Gates has been developing. They want, and this is the name they give, a quantum tattoo on everyone who's vaccinated, so they can digitally tell if you've been vaccinated or not. Now, where this is going is this COVID-19 scam. Eventually, the figures will start to drop and they'll ease the lockdown at some point. But what they're planning is other waves. And because the lockdown precedent has been set, there won't be any run-up to lockdown with any other wave. There will be immediate lockdown. This is what it's all about. And they're getting people psychologically subservient to that. And then they will say that if you have the vaccine, and currently there are 7 vaccines said to be in the works for COVID-19, every single one is funded by Bill Gates. This is the same Bill Gates who was involved with his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Event 201, which was a simulation of a coronavirus pandemic and how the authorities would react, exactly as they have, 6 weeks before the thing came to public attention in China. Also running that Event 201 simulation of a coronavirus pandemic was the World Economic Forum, which Gates is massively involved in. This is the 1%. And an organization called the Johns Hopkins University Medical Operation in America. Also there was Johnson & Johnson, who's one of that's now developing the vaccine for COVID-19. The Johns Hopkins organization that took part in that simulation, which turned out to be exactly as it's turned out, also ran a simulation in 2018 along the same lines. Who is collating the global figures quoted in the media of COVID-19 cases and deaths? The Johns Hopkins operation that was involved in these simulations. The idea is that they'll say, if you want to come out of lockdown and you don't want to keep going into lockdown, then you have got to have the vaccine that we say you have to have, so that you are not a threat to the rest of the community.
And that gives you rights.
Yeah.
That's this passport that Bill Gates was talking about.
Yes. Bill Gates is one of the most sinister people on planet Earth, and by God, think of the competition. And so you have a situation where this is where the game is going, that you have this vaccine full of shite to control you and to undermine your health so that we can have more pandemics, or you can't mix with the rest of the community, you can't fly, etc. Now, this is the real reason why Gates and Gavi, this vaccine alliance, has developed this quantum tattoo so that they can tell who's had the vaccine and who hasn't, and there will be technology that you pass through which will pick it up to see if you when you're trying to get on a plane, oh no, you can't, you've not been vaccinated.
Is it like a chip inside of you?
Well, yeah, in simple terms, that's basically what it will be. Exactly what technology they come up with, we'll see. But the principle is exactly that. And when you pass through technology now, at specific points, your temperature is going to be taken. We now have, because what we've got to understand is that the people that run Silicon Valley are lovely people. They care deeply about humanity. So first of all, what they've been doing, they've just released it, people like Google, is they're releasing mobile phone tracking data to governments so governments can see if there's any gathering of people during the lockdown.
Yeah, they found a bunch of kids who went to a spring break party on the beach, 70 of them, and they tracked them to 40 different states in America. I thought that was illegal to give their data up, but they're doing it.
Oh, once you have the lockdown and you suspend democracy, which is what's happened, and you enter a tyranny that can only be described as fascistic, there are no legalities for humans anymore because the government does what it likes. And it's not the politicians, they're just clueless. It's the dark suits behind the government that drive it. So that's only one step from the microchip, which is where they want to go, whereby they will track you wherever you go in real time, and they will say ongoing that only this amount can ever gather together because they don't want mass protests. And they'll know if you do because they'll be tracking you. Now let's go to China. I've been saying in the books and talks for decades that if you want to see what they plan for the West tomorrow, look at China today. So in China, you have a situation, this is where what we've just been talking about is planned to go in the West, whereby there are millions of face recognition cameras. The Metropolitan Police have just introduced face recognition cameras. See, in China, you've got an open tyranny, and so this is what's happening. In the West, it's, oh no, it's not a tyranny, we're just doing it because it is good, right? They have to do it slower. But now they've suspended democracy, they can do it faster, so they're rolling out this 5G, for instance. And so in China, you've got millions of face recognition cameras which are constantly tracking the population in real time. You are a number, brackets see George Orwell, see Aldous Huxley. And I've seen documentaries where they've sent someone out on the streets of China to see how long it would take to find him. Minutes, found you. And what happens is that these face recognition cameras everywhere are, through AI, they're logging your behavior. And what you do is you get social credits. You're being a good boy and girl if you behave the way the government wants. If you don't, those credits are taken away. And when you reach a certain level of credits taken away, then you start to hit consequences. Like there are millions and millions of people in China who, through not behaving as the government wants, are now banned from flying or banned from even going on a train. And this is what is planned. It's total and utter control. And this COVID-19 scam hoax has been designed to create in very fast time the very global centralization of power that we have or I have been highlighting.